Hello everybody and welcome to a new video, and this one's a little different. This is a discussion video similar to my UN rants, but more or less a little more structured, a little bit more, handled a bit better. And the topic that I wanted to talk about is one that is near and dear to my heart, and it involves Super Smash Bros. As you know, the Nintendo Switch 2 is launching on June 5th, and that means with a new console, there will be a new Super Smash Bros. Game that will probably be bigger than Ultimate, better than Ultimate, the bells and whistles and all that fun stuff. There's one issue though. Ultimate has suffered greatly at the hands of many things, including lack of bans on specific character, not just one, and other things. Not unified stage lists, all these things. So here are a couple things that need to happen before the next Smash game launches. And I do mean this heavily, these things need to be put in place well before the game is announced, well before this is a thing, because this would make things a lot easier for every single person involved in the community. Number one, the establishment of a council. The council would be the overall rules creator, the managers, the ones who dictate the season and what happens during the season. This is by far the most important part of everything, and this is also the hardest part of everything. You need a set of TOs from each region to make up this council, and you need them to always be able to get together and get rules sorted throughout the seasons, throughout the time frame of the game, establish rules on a regular and such. And the only way for this to work is for this to work somewhat like a global government of sorts. So you'd need your TOs, your basic TOs, your local TOs who are able to handle the local scene, who handle that stuff, and then they report their findings to a higher up TO who handles a little bit more stuff, and then maybe, depending on how big your region is, you even have a set of higher TOs, and those are the ones that are literally on the council for your region. Every region should be represented to some degree, with NA being represented, obviously, Europe being represented, Japan being represented, and Asia in general being represented. All of the major regions are represented, and all of the major sub-regions inside of those major regions are represented. So, Mexico gets a representation, the parts of Canada, the multiple parts of the USA that are big enough for all of those things, just like the multiple parts of Japan. They should all have their own representatives that then come together to form this council that will then be used to govern it. Every country in Europe should have their own representatives or multiple representatives, and all of this should come in the way where if something is to pass, it has to go through the plurality. It has to be something that either the plurality or the majority of people on this council agree to, determined by the data that they've gotten from their TOs at their local scenes, at their regional scenes, and such like that. That would make things a lot easier for the community, and this would give you what is the precursor to what could be a unified rule set across the board. That is the one thing. The main thing is this council being established. Once this council is established, there are different ways to go about it, but the next thing you probably need to do is then establish your seasons. Essentially, how long each season will last, when there's an off season, because players will need an off season. There shouldn't be Smash tournaments with no off season. That is a lot. Everyone needs a break, even big esports, sports, everything needs a break. You need to establish the timing for the seasons, and that should allow players to know, oh, this is my time here for me to do this, this is my time for me to do that. This should allow tournament organizers to know when they should place their tournaments for, and then, you can still have tournaments in the off season. It's just that's not like mandatory for players to, if they're trying to get ranked and such, to deal with. One other thing I want to make sure when I say this season's testing is that this off period could be used as a grace period to like test specific things or retest specific things. One of the things I want to definitely be looked at, especially because I feel like at the start of the game it's going to make a lot of sense. At the start of the next game, there should be a grace period before rankings actually begin. You can have your tournaments, you can see who's basically leading up to, going to be number one. Well, this grace period is for you to figure out if any of the characters are actually completely absurd or not. Considering how strong and how lengthy it is, the game, and how big the roster probably will be, I'd say about a month or 2, maybe 3 months grace period, and then we get into the tournaments, and you go from your seasons, and maybe the first season's a little shorter because the timing of it based off of the launch isn't the greatest, but it works out a little bit better for that establishment of it. One thing I really want to emphasize on too about that is because of these grace periods, we could also implement that when DLC is being launched and released. When characters are released, everyone jumps on them. Some people try them in tournaments and all that stuff, and a lot of the times it ends up just being problematic or just like you miss a lot of things. No one realizes that this character is really good, even though I noticed a specific block ban. You literally need to be banned day 1, but we're not going to talk about that. But anyway, the point is, it gives you a time period before these characters could be used in majors, a little grace period. So here's the structure that I came up with that would be a nice, decent way to go about dealing with it for the council, the local TOs, and everyone. So locals will be your Wild Wild West. Locals will be your testing grounds. Anything will go at the local level. Essentially, a DLC character is released, their testing ground is the local level. If you want to play this DLC character at a high level, you go to your locals, you have online tournaments, those stuff like that. Because online is not going to come from rankings, your rankings is going to be offline, obviously. So you can have your online tournaments doing it, you can have your local offline. It's just straight across the board. You are basically having a Wild Wild West of using whatever characters and experimenting with the stage list. All that stuff happens on your local level. The TOs then they ask their players all that other stuff, have some surveys filled out or whatever, and that data will then come up towards the higher level. And then once this grace period is over, the council will come together and basically be like, okay, so this character has this, and this. It seems to be, not too powerful, not breaking the rules of competitive Smash, none of that stuff. Alright, we're fine. This character is now allowed into the regionals and the major level and the ranked level tournaments. And it's going to basically keep going like that, where, you have specific things designated to it. And I feel like that'd be really, really cool as well. It makes it so that you have a strict testing ground. You know what's happening. You can see the results of the locals to determine a lot going on. And your top players, if they want to try out these characters, will go to these locals if online isn't very good. And even if online is very good, they're still going to go to these locals because they prefer to have that offline practice. Because at the end of the day, even if online is very good, offline is still going to be different. Case in point, ARMS. There's times I can't react online, and there's times I can react offline, and my reaction time is slow. So it helps me being offline versus online. But that is a point. Another thing I wanted to do that I feel is very important for the Smash community to get down and focus on as well, or be just really cool in general, is that the ranking should be limited in a sense to a top 100. Only the top 100 players worldwide get ranked, and every single region has their own overall regional rankings as well. And that's basically leads into what I would like to be like the off-season kind of major thing. So what I was thinking is that a Smash season lasts whatever amount of months. You have designated tournaments every season that are like majors, regardless of. These are the tournaments you have to go to. These are the big ones. These are the ones that are designated majors. It's not like the specific characters are giving, like specific players are giving points. Like that still matters for the rankings and all this stuff. But these specific tournaments are major. Well, at the end of the season, right? Once all of these tournaments have played and whatnot, every single thing comes together and you get your top 100 rankings for the season. This is not how the season ends though. Once you've established your top 100 rankings, during an off period, there will be a bunch of tournaments where every region where there are players that have not made it to these top 100 settings will now have a bunch of tournaments to take place over that month to determine, I don't know how many players, but until we get a total of 128 players there. And this will be the actual seeding going into what I would say would be a World Cup of sorts for Smash. And it's like held every year, end of the season, like once your ranking is literally your seed. Doesn't matter how well you're doing your rank, it basically end of season thing. Your ranking is your seed. So that we don't have to talk about, oh, but this player was losing. No, your ranking is your seed. And whoever wins that big super duper tournament could be like, oh, I'm the champion for that season or whatnot. But you can also still be running around saying, well, yeah, you're the champion for that tournament. You were the best guy that day. But I also ended up being ranked 1 for the season. So I'm still technically more consistent and all that stuff. So, you still have a little bit of banter and all that stuff to go around it. But it'd be really cool. And this tournament shouldn't be hosted in one singular region. It should rotate around. It should be in North America. It should be in Europe. I would say it should be in Japan, but I know y'all will want your prize money, so I don't know about that one. But, things like that should be a thing, and that would be really, really cool for the Smash scene, and actually give you something to work towards. And I know a lot of people will be like, but Nintendo and the Smash World Tour, Gimmer screwed up. Vichy Boot Camp screwed up, okay? Panda Cup was in the right direction, and then Vichy Boot Camp decided to screw everyone because they screwed up. Let's just put an underline on that. They straight up should not be a part of the council. I know a lot of people are going to be mad about this, but you have to look at your history and you have to do things to avoid repeating history. Vichy Boot Camp is not good enough. They're not professional enough, and they do not have the right relationship with the IP holder to be the ones in charge or even have any representation on this council. Okay? We know that Gimmer is a TO and a bunch of other stuff as well. They are the only people I would explicitly say should not be a part of this council because they might potentially screw people over just based off of past history. And yeah. But that's pretty much all I really wanted to say. These are some of the things I would like to establish. And that little tournament thing was like a little bonus because, you could even have your own little championships for each region during the little off period. Little things that could happen that would make it very interesting. But it's a lot of work. I'm not even going to come out and say that. But the establishing of a council, having locals as a testing ground, having a DLC grace periods, testing characters at the end of every season, if they got banned for a season, testing stage list, if they got thing, and coming to a unified stages for that season. And every season, I want to emphasize on this, every season should be different. Every season should have a different stage list. Every season should have different, rules in place so that things are a little bit more in place. You should be experimenting between seasons, and that's what your locals are also for. It's an experimentation ground so that when you get to the big actual competitions, you'll have a good idea as to what needs to be done. So with that said, I want to thank you all so very much for watching this video. I know it's a little bit rambling, but this is something that's been on my mind for a while, and I feel like Smash players would benefit if they actually had a nice little, here's a good idea bubble to work towards and start working towards it now. Because if you don't do it now, Smash Ultimate 2 or whatever is going to launch, and then you're just going to end up having another repeat of Smash Ultimate, another repeat of Brawl, another repeat of Smash 4 where regardless of what's happening, y'all just get screwed simply because one DLC character or a bunch of DLC characters come out and ruin it, or one character is so overtuned that it's ridiculous. Again, I also feel like one thing that should be established heavily with the competitive community, for sure, is what makes competitive Smash. Because I'm gonna be real honest with y'all, I've watched enough documentaries to see what I have come to as my conclusion, and that Blockman completely jumps over all of that and is way beyond the pale. And there are people who are still going to try to debating whether or not that is Smash or not. And here is my definitive answer for anyone that actually cares about this as I end this video. I think the Blockman is playing Smash Bros. As in, you're playing a casual Smash Bros, he's doing a lot of stuff. Casual Smash Bros should consistently be expanding into different areas. It's going to, be chaotic, be wild, be a lot. You should not even be playing with all items on or any of that stuff. Casual Smash Bros has gone way too chaotic. And this is from someone who's, I've played Smash all my life. I've played some 64, I shouldn't say all my life. I played since I was like 5, Smash when I was 5, but 64 Melee all the way up. And around Brawl is when I found like you can't really have a decent game with all items on. And it's even worse in Smash 4 and Ultimate. As you go further along, it gets way too chaotic, way too crazy, all that stuff. So at this point you need to have a nice little separation between what is casual Smash and how to expand casual Smash, which will always be Nintendo's goal. They will always be the focus on expanding what is the core Smash for this, and the core Smash for this is casual Smash. And then we, the ones who are playing more competitively, have to decide what is competitive Smash. And we have come to a very simple conclusion. Flat stages, stages with platforms, all the stages are symmetrical to some degree. Sometimes there's a little bit of hazards on the side with, platforms moving here and there. But for the most part, it's there, and the characters, there's no random item spawning, there's no walls, there's no way for you to adjust the stage and stuff like that. Since Steve does that, that's why he should have been back from the first place. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. I want to thank you all so much for watching. I'm sorry for the rambling at the end. I just had to do my little ban Steve rant, I guess. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. But Smash community, seriously, y'all need to establish a council as soon as possible. For real. That is the only way you will ever actually make some serious progress. With that said, peace out. I'm Uran10, and remember, urinators unite.